And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Here in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. Let's get right to it. Joining me on the line right now is someone that I think everyone in Rhode Island knows and knows well. And of course, I'm talking about former Representative Aaron Regenberg. He was kind enough to join us in between, well, a hectic, crazy day. A few weeks ago, we had the pleasure of having folks from Never Again Action Rhode Island on. And they talked about their mission, their core belief system. And I found that, quite frankly, their attitude about refugees, folks seeking citizenship in this country, dovetailed nicely with my own. I firmly believe in the right of man and woman to live wheresoever they choose. I firmly believe in the property rights of the individual to host those, regardless of territorial boundaries drawn, whether it be 1,000 years ago or, in this case, maybe 200 years ago. It speaks to our culture right now, how we treat folks looking to join us here in the United States. I personally have traveled to Mexico and the border and have met with folks who, quite frankly, I consider patriots. They have literally put their lives at risk so they could join us here in the United States, pursuing, well, what every family does, however that family is constructed. They're looking for a future for their children. They're looking for personal liberty. They're looking for safety. So when I began to read about Never Again Action, I was impressed. Folks drawing on their own personal religious beliefs, their own religious history, and applying those lessons, if you will, to what many believe is the beginning of a dangerous period here in the United States, where, if this sounds familiar, let me know, where individuals are villainized, perhaps because of their religion, perhaps because of their culture, or in this case, perhaps because of the color of their skin or where they are from. And these folks have been willing to do something that most aren't, which is to, quite frankly, leave their comfort zone. And I mean leave their comfort zone to protest on behalf of people, in many cases they've never met. And I'm talking about the ongoing protests at the Wyatt Detention Center here in Rhode Island, a for-profit prison that is, quite frankly, paying the bills, if you will, on the backs of folks trying to come to this country. It's disgusting. And I'm glad that someone is stepping up and saying, well, never again. Aaron, thank you for joining us on the show. I think this is the first time that we've been together like this. And again, I appreciate you taking time on a hectic Friday night to join me.
Pat, I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and I really appreciated how you just articulated that I agree. What could be more American, right, than this commitment to the values of this country, that folks are willing to take that risk to try to seek a better life for their families, some more freedom and security for their family. And again, almost all of us got here in that exact same way because our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents were willing to take that same risk because they felt that same love and dream of something better.
Right. It's well, quite frankly, it's as human as it gets. We are ultimately all created in the same manner. We all want the same things for our family, and the notion that some arbitrarily drawn line will dictate for your future and for your forevermore, if you will, the right to have a shot at that life of liberty and that pursuit of happiness, if I can quote the founding fathers, is just, well, plain nuts. So it's been a challenging few months for you folks. How long? Well, first of all, describe your role, if you will, with the organization, because you are one of a handful of public figures who everyone recognizes and now associates with the movement. So, what's your role?
So I'm an enthusiastic member and sort of volunteer organizer. I think you did a good job of explaining a little bit about what Never Again is. It's really this movement that sprung up organically this summer across the country of Jews alongside immigrants and allies of all faiths who we're coming together to say we cannot stand on the sidelines anymore. We need to take some action about the attacks that we are seeing against our immigrant brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And I think for so many of us, myself included, the importance and urgency of that fight is really informed by our own, personal family history. For me, my grandfather was born in Germany in 1930, and he became a refugee from the Holocaust. He was very lucky he survived. Most of his family did not. And growing up as a kid, when he, and often he did not want to share stories, but when he did share stories about his experiences, the thing that always confused and disturbed me the most was thinking about his neighbors, the people in his town who he grew up with, who were willing to watch that escalating state-sponsored violence against their neighbors and do nothing. And so I think all of us who are involved in this believe very strongly that that sentence that we as Jews grew up hearing, never again, that's not just sort of a throwaway line, right? That's a promise. And it means to keep that promise, it means that we have to do what I wish, the folks in my grandfather's town had done, which was to stand up and put their bodies on the line and do what they could to protect folks that were in the target, that were vulnerable. So that's sort of what Never Again's been doing here in Rhode Island. We've been focused specifically on trying to fight the operation of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, which has a real footprint here. The Wyatt Prison, which, as you said, is the one non-public prison in the state, has a contract with ICE to serve as an ICE detention center. And so asylum seekers, folks who have committed no crime, but as you said at the top of the show, seeking some security and a better life for their families, are being kept there in conditions that, there's reports sound really inhumane. This is a prison that someone died at because of the terrible conditions and violence back in 2008 and 9. And for us, we're saying that if we want Rhode Island to not be complicit in these attacks, these policies against immigrants, then we need to stand up and say we're going to do everything we can to kick ICE out of our state.
And just as an observation, it should be pointed out that the Wyatt Detention Center was literally on a financial life support until they decided to accept the blood money of ICE and the federal government to imprison people who merely are seeking a better life. And, in a sense, they're being artificially resuscitated on a daily basis by yours and my tax dollars and I'm trying to keep it polite here, I'll use the term misguided. I think you could probably tell I feel a lot more strongly, but a misguided approach to law enforcement. And the facility itself has been uniquely troubled. There have been escapes. The folks who work there are paid a substandard wage. And on top of that, to make it even worse, there's little or no training being provided to a lot of these security officers. So you've got an operation being run poorly on the cheap, making blood money off the lives, if you will, of people who are merely seeking, again, a better life. It's outrageous.
And that's a point to really underline, right? We're paying for this. Right. It's hard to say, oh, that's not my problem. I don't have anything to do with that. I'm not complicit in that. When it's our tax dollars that are making that happen. It's under our flag. It is just taking the morality out of it, just putting on your sort of economic efficiency hat. Uh-huh. It's a terrible use of public resources. These are not people that we should be spending so much locking away. And then of course we have to put our moral hat back on, because that's really what the crisis is.
Right. And again, there is nothing immoral, I should say, about people being imprisoned merely because of the accident of their birth. And so we come, of course, to the events that were replayed again this weekend. And let me just ask one other question before I forget. Other states are starting to respond, if you will, to ICE. And other states, you're starting to see a momentum build for folks kicking ICE out, if you will, saying no mas. And does that embolden the folks? I mean, hopefully that gives you folks some, emotional support there that the rest of the country at least is responding.
Emotional support and very clear sort of policy models, right? California just last month passed legislation to ban the operation of private prisons and detention centers. It's going to lead to the shuttering of the 4 main ICE detention centers in that state. New Jersey just a week and a half ago put out a new executive order that bans any local or state law enforcement from signing contracts with ICE like they have at the Wyatt. Just to name 2, there are a number of states that are stepping up. And here in Rhode Island, what we're trying to say is that our state leaders need to step up too. We heard after the 2016 election, and we heard again, around election time in 2018, a number of our state leaders saying, we're gonna fight back against these policies from the Trump administration. We're going to protect our immigrant neighbors. But here we are. ICE is operating in our state, and we could take action at the state level, but our leaders are not. So that's a problem. What we're arguing is that is not in line with the promise of never again. Putting ourselves back in the past in times when state-sponsored violence has targeted vulnerable communities. We know how important it is that we use every tool at our disposal to stop that before it gets worse, and we know how bad it can get. So we're pushing for the governor, for legislative leaders to really step up. We were very excited that 2 weeks ago, Governor Raimondo responded to one of our demands, which is around passing legislation to ban for-profit private prisons in Rhode Island. We've got the Wyatt, which is this weird sort of quasi-public-private thing, and we know that the bondholders who are controlling the Wyatt right now through UMB Bank, which is this billion-dollar bank out of Missouri, they are actually trying to sell the Wyatt to, if you can imagine a worse situation with even less public accountability, they're trying to sell it to one of the national for-profit prison corporations. There's 3 big ones that have, over the last decade and a half, made billions and billions of our taxpayer dollars, because again, every one of these dollars is coming from us, creating these unaccountable for-profit prisons. So they want to bring that here in Rhode Island. So we're fighting that, among other things, and we're starting to see a response from our leaders, which is exciting. I think it's a result of folks really stepping up and saying, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep coming back. We're going to keep bugging you. We're going to keep forcing this issue until we get a response. But there's a lot more to do.
And if I can give you a little bit of tip, UMB Bank is a fascinating story because it's one of those financial institutions that's kind of quietly there. And most folks, well, they've never heard of it. There's certainly no UMB banks at the Stop and Shop, and they're not going to run into one down in Centerville or anywhere here, or if they're in Boston. It's one of those quiet corporate-style banks. I'm going to give you a little tip if you want to have some fun and create another pressure point, but it's just between you and me. So guess who one of UMB Bank's biggest customers is?
Please tell me.
Fidelity. Fidelity uses UMB Bank as their corresponding bank for almost all or a significant part of their cash management, essentially cash checking accounts. If you have a Fidelity account, hypothetically, speaking for a friend, and you look at your check, it'll say UMB Bank of Missouri. So just kind of throw that out there. That's my travel tip for today, Aaron. How about that?
I appreciate that, and I might want to follow up with you off the on that at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of sign on to the coalition every Friday night from 6 to 9, and we'll give you a variety of fun facts and trivia that'll improve the quality of your life. Now, of course, you know, we had Mr. Eden a couple weeks ago. He was great and really gave us a background. And at the time, I really didn't want to focus so much on the incident, if you will. It was still being discussed amongst the law enforcement community. And the goal here is not to provide, if you heard my intro, our tagline is that we are outrage porn free. Not interested in ginning up emotions, pitting people against each other. There's enough of that crap that happens here in Rhode Island anyway. We need to find ways to get people to, well, that's why we call it the coalition, to get people to, agree on what they agree on and work on that for the time being. And we will get pissed off at each other later about something else. But ultimately, it came to a head this week. The Attorney General announced that after a grand jury was convened, there were no charges going forward. And your reaction was pronounced and quite to the point. And I wonder if you could just discuss that a little bit. And I know we don't have we're pressing your time here, but just give us your reflection on that. And coincidentally, as you made public earlier this year that you're attending law school, and there's a lot of chaos and confusion about this. I think the Attorney General tried to do a good job explaining. I'm going to take the high road here, but there's confusion over a couple issues. First of all, the sheer outrageousness of it, and number two, is it in fact legal now for prison guards or, well, quite frankly, anyone in law enforcement to just simply, at will, try and take out a crowd? Because I quite frankly, I share a lot of your feelings. What's your thoughts?
So, we were, I think disappointed isn't a strong enough word,
right,
to share sort of the emotions that went through the Never Again group, the folks who were participants in this, who were there on August 14th. I think there's really three issues that we feel is really outrageous about this. The first is the way that this investigation was conducted. The demonstrators, the folks who were there, who participated in the grand jury investigation as witnesses to what happened that night, with, I think I can say, unanimity, and that's not a word that you can use very often, but across the board, left their grand jury witness testimony feeling completely demoralized and frustrated, and there were people in tears by the sense that they got that this was being conducted in a biased way, that the prosecution team had a very clear agenda. They wanted the results that they ultimately got, and they conducted the process in the way that they presented information, in the way that they questioned and grilled and turned around the words of witnesses, that it was very clear what they wanted to have happen. And again, and I would say in general, like, the folks who went through this process, just personally, from my experience with them, they're not people who are prone to exaggerate. And they're people who understand the law. Jared Goldstein, who's a associate dean of Roger Williams Law School,
right.
They understand how these systems are supposed to work. Mm-hmm. So that's number one, that we see, and we've seen this across the country, a different standard between what you or I, and particularly, what we might see immigrants or people of color in our state, their treatment by our criminal justice system, and the treatment of law enforcement, even in this case, privatized law enforcement. So that's, that just the concept of equal protection under the law, that's really disturbing. Number two, and this references the point that you made, I think a lot of people are frankly frightened about the signal that this sends to everyone out there who saw it. not for nothing, we're living at a moment in history when hate crimes, when politically incited or fueled violence is a real concern. Heather Heyer, she is never going to wake up again because someone drove their truck into a crowd because they didn't agree with what was happening politically. And so to send a signal right now to folks out there that that theoretically they can take the same action. They could literally drive a truck into a crowd of folks they don't agree with on camera, in front of the media, in front of lawyers, all of the things that happened with us on August 14th, and get away scot-free with no consequences. That's a chilling signal. And then that connects to the third, I think, danger of this, which is the impact it could have on suppressing folks' exercise of their First Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. Someone who's been very involved in Never Again, her name's Ellen. She's incredible. She's a 73-year-old woman. She's been doing this, she's been doing activism her whole life. She was involved in the anti-war movement, the nuclear non-proliferation movement. She's been around the block many times. And this week, she said to me, this is the first time out of all of the activism, all of the protests that I've been to over the years, this is the first time that I'm actually feeling kind of scared and might think twice next time before coming out. So for all of these reasons, we think this is a really bad outcome. We know that the old saying is that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. The prosecutorial team has huge discretion to make to present the case and make what they want to have happen. And apparently in Rhode Island, there's one standard for you and me, and even ham sandwiches, and there's another standard for law enforcement.
No, absolutely. This needed to go to trial, and then the trial process, by definition, amongst in front of a jury of peers, I think would have been I'll throw back to my high school English, but it would have been a cathartic experience for folks in the activism crowd because they needed to have their day in court, And then, in fact, if the gentleman was found innocent, you will at least have had the opportunity to have that day in court. And here's to me what's especially chilling. I'm old enough now to have lived through and witnessed the war on drugs, and organizations like Jump Out Boys here in Providence and across the nation. Broken glass policing, everything. I've seen that firsthand. I lived in New York City during that time. We were watching, if you will, the war on immigration, the war on that's going on. We're watching the war on sex workers, and we're seeing a pattern where the law enforcement community in this nation is using the court system, if you will, to whitewash their sins. And what folks need to start understanding, that the oldest cliche in the civil rights book is that if I'm not doing anything wrong, what can happen? Well, guess what, folks? A lot can happen, and ultimately, that standard line about I watched them do, and no one said anything, and then I watched it. We know what happens. It moves throughout the food chain. We all ultimately, if we continue to allow elements of law enforcement to empower themselves above the citizenry, then at some point in time they will come for you, and they will come for me. And shows like this, where you and I can, despite our political differences, can have frank and honest conversations about the status of law enforcement here in our own hometown, will cease to exist because of that same fear. Because they will slowly take away the real estate that is our civil rights, constitutes our civil rights. And that's what everyone needs to be afraid of. You don't have to be a member of a marginalized community to all of a sudden wake up one day in the prison pipeline. You just don't.
Right. And Pat, I have to get running, but there's the last point that I'd love to make is, the Providence Journal reported that, according to Captain Woodworth, the person who was driving the truck, according to his lawyer, he's going to be, considering whether to reapply and try to get his job back at the Wyatt. And that really highlights, I think, the main issue here, which is that if this institution, as part of this larger anti-immigration system, is willing to unleash this kind of violence against, nonviolent protesters in front of cameras, in front of lawyers, in front of the news media, if they're willing to do that, and by the way, face no consequences, what can we imagine is happening behind those walls, where it is a black box, where there's no transparency, there's no lawyers, there's no media cameras, and the people are ICE detainees who have absolutely no power to speak up or fight back when there's violence happening or other inhumane conditions. So that, I think, that should really be the bottom line here, is what we experienced, the fear that folks like Ellen and others in our group experienced this last week. That is just the palest, shadow
Right.
of a sliver of what our immigrant neighbors are dealing with every single day, of the violence that folks behind those walls are experiencing, of the fear that families in our state who are forced to live in the shadows are having to experience. And so that is why we are not giving up this fight. I think we had a Never Again had an organizing meeting yesterday with dozens, maybe 30, 40 of our coordinators together, and the feeling in the room was, we are more determined than ever. We are going to be going back to the Wyatt. We're going to be going back to the State House. We are not going to let them intimidate or scare us, and we're going to keep fighting until our immigrant brothers and sisters, who, as you said, are doing what they're doing for their family, for the most patriotic American kind of values and reasons you can think of, until they can have the same kind of safety and security that we would want for every single Rhode Islander.
Well, I couldn't agree more, Aaron. I know you got to go. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. I'd love to have you in studio sometime soon, or even have a cup of coffee, and we'll go live somewhere from someplace to continue the conversation. Give my best to the folks, and I'm going to try to make sure that I'm at your next protest. So thanks for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, and I'll definitely like to take you up on that cup of coffee.
All right.
All right. Have a great night. Bye.
Thank you so very much. Folks, that was Aaron Regenberg. Of course, he former state representative, now human rights activist. Folks, I'm a libertarian. I don't believe really in borders. I'll just admit that. That makes me an open borders person, doesn't it? Well, yes, it does. Because fundamentally, I see the ultimate human right being that of the ability to move freely. I believe in the free exchange of people, ideas, and commerce. And that's just not a throwaway line for me. That's what I live now. It's taken me a long time to wake up to that reality and to realize that. And I have to thank a lot of my libertarian friends for kind of coaching me along. But now I see it as clearly as one can. And again, if you just have to put yourself in the position of these folks, for whom many live truly a life of damnation. We've seen what's happened just this past week in Mexico, in Chile, around Latin and Central America, a great deal of which has to do with our American foreign policy and our policy on drugs. We broke it, we own it, let's fix it. We're going to take a quick break right now. Joining me at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock, we'll go into the Libertarian Hour. A gentleman by the name of Joshua Smith will be joining me via the miracle of Skype telephone. We're going to talk with him about his candidacy for the chairmanship of the Libertarian Party. We're going to talk about immigration. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us, where links to, well, we're working on the cosmetics on the YouTube page, and we're working on getting the stuff up on the podcast page, but where links to all of this can be found, as well as we're doing everything we can on our little Liberty News page to amplify organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, organizations like we just spoke with, to continue to bypass, if you will, do an end around, a roundabout, a lazy mass media. I don't subscribe to a lot of the conspiracy theories that my friends do about the media. I just find them to be remarkably lazy and short-sighted. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network. Here in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course, the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us, where links to our Facebook page, our Liberty Media page, our YouTube page, all can be found. And we're working on the cosmetics of all this. It's always a work in progress. We're celebrating our 7th year as a programming entity. We started out in the earliest days of internet radio at WBOB. We moved on to AM 790 and then the big WPRO. Just a few short years ago, we went digital and moved here to the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. We continue to march on ever upwards. So let's get right to it. Tonight, joining me is someone that I'm proud to call a friend, someone who is quite active, hyperactive, if you would say, in the libertarian movement. Not just the party, but the movement. From his earlier days as one of the founding podcasters, if you will, of the Liberty movement, then into active participation in the Libertarian Party, and now into active leadership in the Libertarian Party as an alternate member to the Libertarian National Committee, the ruling body, if you will, of the Libertarian Party, the Big L. His commitment to liberty has been lifelong, and now he is attempting to run for the second time to be the chairman of the Libertarian Party nationally. It was quite a controversial race 4 years ago. And in recognition, even though he did not win, it was clear to the party at large that folks had spoken and needed his participation on the Libertarian National Committee, where he has served now for a couple of years, working, if you will, with me on the Affiliate Support Committee. Joshua Smith, welcome back to the Coalition.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Pat. I really appreciate it.
So let's we've got a little bit of time here. The first time you were on, you were in town, and you just kind of stepped from behind the curtain for a few minutes. Let's talk about Joshua Smith for a little bit, because the beauty of indie media is you got time. You can really develop a subject, really get into a conversation. Tell us a little about yourself, your background, the early days, if you will, and what got you into the liberty movement.
Sure, absolutely, Pat. I have a pretty normal upbringing. I'm from a broken family, a single mother home, like probably the majority of children these days. I had my problems, did pretty well in school, but lost interest at the time around high school, and I joined the military straight out of high school right after September 11th. I was going to protect my country, I thought, and within 8 or 9 months of being in the military, I was at war. I was in the Middle East. I was a big part of the shock and awe campaign, and I found myself slowly getting jaded on, the two-party system and the military-industrial complex, and not really being happy with what had happened, why we were in Iraq. And so when I got home, I was still a registered Republican, but I didn't find a home for my political values there anymore until I found Ron Paul in 2008. And I worked on Ron Paul's campaign in 2008 during the Occupy movements. If you're familiar with those, I was working, in Oakland with the Occupy movements, trying to campaign for Ron Paul. So it's pretty interesting because, it's a pretty leftist movement mostly. Mm-hmm. We had the opportunity to bring a lot of people over to our side there. It really did help out with his campaign here in California. And then sometime in 2009 or 2010, I joined the Libertarian Party for the first time because I heard them Adam Kokesh talking about it, which I think back and I was like watching videos and reading stuff that he did. And so I found the Libertarian Party and became a member. I never really found a viable place for my activism at the time. I didn't realize there was a state affiliate. I didn't realize there were local affiliates. I really had no idea what I was doing. And so I ended up, kind of doing my own brand of activism and doing the publication and Think Liberty and, just being a blogger and podcaster and, doing interviews with big libertarian thinkers around the country like Walter Block and Michael Pickens and Larry Sharp. And then sometime before this 2016 presidential race, I, found the local party in Washington. I live in Washington State, Southern Washington, and I found the local party there, and they were rocking. And I ended up finding the state party there, and they were rocking, and they were in a competition with who could get more members with Colorado. And so I went to their state convention, and I ended up getting voluntold that I would be a regional rep there.
We've all been voluntold. Yeah.
Yeah, I was the only one that showed up to their state convention from the region, and so they made me the region rep. And like I said, we had one local party in 5 counties, so I started working to try and build new affiliates. And there was a really cool city council race going on in one of the counties, and it was a learning experience for me. And I felt like I was doing it all by myself at the time. And then come 2017, I was really following the national leadership, and I worked on Gary campaign in Southern Washington, and I wasn't happy with the leadership, and so I decided to try and throw up a Hail Mary, if you call it that. It was I never really expected it to be this big campaign. I thought, I have this publication that has about 12,000 followers. I'll put out an intent to run statement, see what happens, and it blew up. It really did. I ended up traveling to 20 states. I got to learn all kinds of invaluable stuff about the movement and activism and politics and how to make the party more successful. And so it was a win for me. I lost. Eventually I took 25% or 23.5% of the vote at the national convention. I didn't do very well in the debate, but I learned a lot, and I ended up on the board anyways. Then I moved back to California. I ended up on their executive committee. I ended up becoming the treasurer of my local party, the chair of the affiliates support committee for national. I'm on the platform committee, the membership committee, the OpsCom committee. I mean, just any committee that I could get on, I got on, because it's just a learning experience. And, so 2020, getting ready to roll around, and I give it another shot. I've learned. I can take everything that I've learned and kind of the good and the bad and step back and reassess the situation and try and bring that fire back to the LNC again.
Now, let's step back for a second and talk about Think Liberty, because really it and a few others were a handful of the first libertarian media outfits, if you will, to recognize the power of new media, to recognize that, quite frankly, the mainstream media isn't really hankering to invest much time in talking to libertarians. They're just not. Despite having a great story in 2016, it was still pulling teeth to get national coverage. I think the lesson that we need to learn is that independent media, in the aggregate, one podcast at a time, one effort at a time, one blog at a time, is a powerful, powerful tool. What were you thinking when you got involved in the formation of Think Liberty, and what were some of the early subjects you covered, and when did you realize that you'd sort of gotten lightning in a bottle?
Sure. The cool thing about Think Liberty is that it was a combination of contributors from all different walks of life and all different philosophies, and it wasn't just a set like, hey, we're an anarcho-capitalist output, or we're just minarchists, or we're just libertarians, or we're party politics. It was kind of a really good mix of things, and so I kind of knew that would help move the publication forward, because it had something for everybody. And I just want to be clear, I don't really work with Think Liberty more much. I'm still really good friends with them, but I was just way too busy, and those guys do a great job without me. And but at the time, it was, we wanted to do something fun with friends, and I think we focused a lot on, doing libertarian news events and philosophy papers and opinion pieces. My big focus was doing the interviews. We had these YouTube interviews with, like I said, Walter Block, Patrick Friedman, it's just great people who need to be highlighted in the liberty movement. And the cool thing is that when an independent media source like that takes control and starts getting followers, they make new libertarians, and it's important for us to be aggressive and go out and get mainstream media as much as possible, but it's also important that we're using our small news media publications to bolster our campaigns and our activists. Yeah, it was a great thing. Being a part of it.
No, it's interesting to me. Recently, a couple of people have thrown some slings and arrows at the libertarian blogosphere and the libertarian podcast universe, and from within the movement. And Yeah, there's to a certain degree, there's some Me Too conversations that take place in the sense of, there's a certain breadth of material that's covered and recovered. But I just want to take a shout out to everything from Think Liberty on down to that one person who might be just doing a podcast in his basement. If it's all important. It's critical that we amplify each other's voices. A couple folks recently have taken some, I think, some really insulting shots at, at some of the smaller ones who are, maybe they're either the material or the production values might not be quite up to the acumen of some of these people. And it's only a handful of people doing this, but I just want to point out that anyone out there who is investing in a podcast or a blog, who's willing to expend the intellectual effort to discuss issues like this, I just think are incredibly important, from the biggest to the smallest. And organizations like Think Liberty started out with a handful of people. And quite frankly, it's been a monumental effort. They've changed a lot of minds. They've introduced people. And listen, hell, if that one little podcast or that one little blog reaches someone that we weren't able to reach as a national party, it's a win as far as I'm concerned, and it's helped keep those people engaged. So I just wanted to put that out there because every one of these larger blogs started out as a handful of people in a basement or a handful of people at a bar just throwing ideas back and forth. If we can harness all of that energy in 2020, and Lord knows we're going to need it, then hell, every one of those folks are soldiers for liberty. It's something I feel very strongly about. The state of the party now. Now, you've got a political party comprised of people who very often don't believe in political parties. You've got a handful of caucuses that are, I think, working aggressively to promote their own perspective on liberty. Talk to me about the Mises Caucus, because it's probably the most remarkable story within our universe, if you will, our world within the last 2 years. What has Michael Hayes accomplished, along with, quite frankly, a group of other activists? But he's the front-facing person. What have they accomplished, and what do you think the value of them is to the movement at large?
Yeah, absolutely. And the caucus, much like me, saw a leadership team in the Libertarian Party that they weren't happy with. They didn't really reflect their values. They didn't think the work that was being done was the work that needed to be done. And so they started a group of people that, it initially took form as a group, right? It was like a Facebook group. And then it became this PAC, and we ended up filing as a federal hybrid PAC. We have a super PAC and a regular candidate PAC, and it just kind of just steamrolled into this beautiful thing where we've been able to work with local candidates in the country. We've given over $6,000 to 8 local candidates around the country. We were able to work on decrim Denver to get psilocybin decrimmed in Colorado. We're now working Texas gun legislation initiative to roll back the gun laws that we're trying to propose there. So it was born out of this. We weren't happy with the way something was running, and we're going to do something about it. And now it's becoming the driving force of the Libertarian Party. We've been able to instill people leadership all over the country, from the national on down to local level. We've been able to help get people elected. We endorsed a elected city council member in Oklahoma, which was really nice. It was before we could really financially help anybody, but we did endorse him, and then he won. And so it's becoming this big driving force behind the liberty movement and the party. And as the candidate committee chair, I'm just couldn't be prouder of those guys. They're really, really doing a lot of great stuff. So, but it's beautiful. And a lot of flack, but they're doing a lot of work. So,
well, and to that end, I'm not sure why we as libertarians constantly try to produce this circular firing squad. They're out there doing something that not a lot of people are, which is raising money. And not only are they raising money, they're writing checks to candidates. And there's something about when you're, when you're a candidate for a local office, which is, we all agree, the building block really of the liberty movement going forward, and you get a national recognition from a large group of fellow, again, soldiers in the Liberty War, for lack of a better cliche. But quite frankly, you get that type of recognition, and then you get a check in the mail. So maybe you're not spending your grocery money that week to do the cards that you're handing out, or to pay for those internet ads. You know, somebody beside you is actively involved in financially supporting a campaign. They've got skin in the game, and that's what's been missing from the National Party. There isn't a whole hell lot of skin in the game. It's great to go out and say, we need 100,000 candidates. Come on down. The price is right. And then, and again, I'm not here to knock anyone's efforts, because there's a lot of very good people, both at the LNC headquarters and a lot of people working very hard. But it's great to promote that. We need to support it as well. And the only way you support that, if you're living in Jersey, or in my case, Rhode Island, is stroking a check. It's nice to share on Facebook. It's nice to retweet, but you're asking people to go run for office on a third party, which often needs great introduction, often needs to overcome popular myths about the party, to, in many cases, people who could run as a Republican or Democrat and win, or certainly have a much easier time of it. You're asking people to take time away from their families, whether they're, in your case, running for the national chair, or in the case of local candidates. You're asking a lot from a certain group of people. And the ability of a caucus to coalesce around a certain set of issues within the Liberty Movement, and then get those people moving to actually produce real gains. Listen, we know, you and I know, and everybody in the movement who's an activist knows about the herding cats. We need more of that and less conversation, quite frankly.
Sure.
You know, we need more people who are focused on actual productivity, on, you ready for this? Accomplishing things. Because isn't that the single biggest issue here in our party? We have thousands of really nice, well-intentioned, really wicked smart people, don't we? But if we don't accomplish anything, we lose another generation to the statists.
Correct.
What are your thoughts on running thousands of candidates and nobody home?
I think it was a mistake. I think asking to run 2,000 candidates when we barely have the infrastructure to run 200 was a mistake, and frankly, we got laughed at in a lot of states. We had a lot of paper candidates, a lot. We got laughed at in states where they had a candidate running with no website. It's not a good look for us, and it doesn't make us look very professional if we're just running 200 really good candidates and 500 paper candidates. It's not helpful, and we don't have the infrastructure to support all those candidates. And when we ask a candidate to run, we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure built so that those candidates can feel like they're running for a reason, they're running for a cause, they can win. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm running for chair. It's one of the reasons why I want good leadership in the party, because leadership strokes a culture that has good candidates and builds infrastructure and raises money. Right. And so that's what we need to go. I think that is a noble goal to run 2,000 candidates across the country, but if you're asking people to run and you're not telling them how to run and you're not giving them the cheat codes, if you will, then they're not going to do anything spectacular, and we're going to get laughed at. Right.
I mean, ultimately, what you literally had situations where we're asking people who would otherwise be activists in, and again, I want to be careful here, because everyone who ran, everyone who expends that kind of effort is a hero in my eyes. It's just that,
yeah.
Are we burning up the efforts of some of our heroes? Because
Sure.
Someone who ran for office might have been a perfectly great campaign manager and in someone else's campaign, or might have been really good at making some phone calls and really good at getting out the vote effort, as opposed to trying to maintain this facade of having 2,000 campaigns. And again, there are a couple of really good, campaign activists / teachers, who in and of themselves have sacrificed greatly. But we're talking about an entire nation here. We need to pick our battles.
Pat, if the goal had been, say, hey, we would like to run 2,000 local candidates around the country. Now that might have been a goal that maybe would have attained a lot of things, because then then you've got to think about it. There's 2,000 communities learning about libertarianism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there, the city council campaigns or a mayoral race, they're typically a little easier to run, especially in some of these small towns. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time. You can make it to an event on the weekend and speak about it. But when you start getting into some of these bigger federal campaigns and some of these state rep campaigns, I mean, the state rep campaign that I initially was going to run, the lady raised like $4 million for a state rep campaign. That's more than the whole national. That's more than the whole national budget for our party.
Right.
We asymmetrical warfare sounds good, but we can get outspent on all fronts. But what we can do is run local and county races and really make a difference. And I think that Jeff Hewitt in California proved that. So.
Right, and ultimately, that's a place where you don't have to be part of a large political machine within a large statewide organization to legislate successfully.
Sure.
When you look at what a certain city councilwoman has done in a certain small town in Minnesota, when you look at the folks that we've had out there who have managed to be successful against incredible odds. I mean, astonishing work. You're all of a sudden able to legislate. If you're on a water board or a school board, you change people's lives, and that L for libertarian is right there. You're able to, on a daily basis, explain to people why your philosophy is tied into the type of changes you're attempting to make.
Exactly.
And so, what would it kind of lends into the all right, we've taken some, I don't want to say shots, but we've discussed that program. What approach do you want to take as national chairman to getting people elected at some level? What's your goal? What's your aims?
My goal is obviously, working with affiliates to become stronger. I think that having a strong affiliate wherever you're running is always going to help, help you be more successful, right? So I really want to raise our membership numbers, because that gives us more activists, that gives us more campaign volunteers, that gives us more donors. Those are the kind of things that can help build an infrastructure to be able to run 2,000 candidates across the country. So that's what national leadership should be focused on. But the donor base, the membership base, new activists, new memberships, fundraising, those are the things that they should always be focused on. And we need to be aggressive. And media, the aggressive media mindset where the media is not going to come to us, so our national leadership team is going to go out and take media. That is so important, because now people are going to start looking at L next to candidates when they hear the word libertarian, right? So those are the really big things for me. Is that, like I said, it's the fundraising, the member retention and recruitment, and aggressive media strategies. Those have got to be the most important things coming out of national.
Let's talk messaging. Social media is that, they talk about the double-edged weapon. Social media can work for you. Social media can be a disaster. Should social media ever be divisive or used as a tool to divide libertarians?
Not to divide libertarians, no. We don't have enough libertarians to divide.
Let's talk about the primacy. Okay, you and I are clearly big L libertarians.
Sure.
Should social media ever be used to support the goals of other political parties?
No, absolutely not. Not from the big L Libertarian Party. That is just asinine to even think that we could get away with doing that and it would somehow help our cause. No, absolutely not. Those two parties are enemies. They try to keep us off the ballot in several states and counties. They try to use money to defeat our candidates. We should never help them, ever.
On any level, regardless of personal relationships.
Sure. I mean, look, if you're personally friends with a Liberty Republican that is going to run in a race that has no libertarian running in it and nobody that's more libertarian, do what you want. But the national social media should not be used to bolster any candidates that are not libertarians.
End of story.
End of story.
Okay. I mean, to me, it's an absolute. And you and I are kind of alluding to, and we don't need to get into the muck of it, but we've been treated to the specter of the highest levels of leadership somehow promoting the notion that a Republican, the same party that has expanded our wars, the same party that has engaged in a generation of discrimination against the LGBTQ community, the same political party that is literally imprisoning in concentration camp-like facilities folks who want to come to this country illegally, the same political party that has destroyed the value of our currency, simultaneously blowing up deficits. For the love of God, why the hell would we ever want to do anything to enable these people? Explain, Lucy, explain.
I don't have an answer for you, Pat.
And the notion that somehow do you subscribe to the notion once and for all that liberty Republicans somehow can convert the abusive husband that is the Republican Party? Can they convert those people?
No. They're the whipping boys for the party. I mean, there's just no way. Anytime someone tells me that as a libertarian I need to join the Republican Party and try to change it from within, I just scoff, because it's just not possible. The Republican Party has been going the wrong direction for a couple decades. Why? How has people getting into it to try and change it changed it? They haven't. It's just gone further down the rabbit hole than what it was even 20 years ago. And it's just insane to think that libertarians can get in there. They don't like us. They don't like our policies. They don't support the things that we want to do. They don't support rolling back all these sweeping regulations and laws and taxes, and they don't want to end the drug war. And why? How on earth do you think you should get in there and change? You can't. You can't do it. There's no way. We have a party for that already. It's called the Libertarian Party, and you're free to join. It's $25 a year, and you will help with that $25 keep our lights on and have candidates win.
It really is that simple. How would you define the role, the working role, day to day, of a national chairman, as opposed to, say, an executive director, as opposed to, say, a staff member? What do you see as the day-to-day responsibilities of a national chairman?
Well, all party business is the day-to-day responsibility of the national chairman. Plain and simple, that's just how it is. Obviously, hiring and firing of staff, but they should be making every day membership calls and fundraising calls every single day. You block out an hour and make some phone calls. They should be doing it every day. You should always be looking for new donors. You should be writing op-eds. You should be trying to call media outlets to get people, either yourself or media liaisons, onto any kind of media we can get people into. There's a lot of work involved there. It's a full-time job. It's not a part-time, whenever you feel like a job. You need to wake up every day. What's best for the party on the very forefront of your brain, and do everything it takes, including making fundraising calls, making membership calls, writing op-ed. This is the kind of stuff that the chair should always be doing.
Let's talk about issues, because quite frankly, there are 1,000 issues we could tackle. But I think it's important that my opinion, I love your insight into this, that the national party, particularly in a non-election year, should focus on. Rather, I find our approach right now, and I'm not, Lord knows I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I find that is sort of the reaction du jour to whatever the perceived crisis is. Should we pick out a couple of issues in a non-election year and really just focus on them and really try to create a better understanding, if you will, not to change to the current winds, not to apologize, but perhaps to pick out a couple of issues and really make them the focus so people walk away with an understanding of what libertarians stand for. If you were to do that on a couple of issues, say, what would be the top 3 issues that you'd want to focus on as national chair, running, if you will, the oversight of the national libertarian machine?
Well, I think the number one issue of our time is the anti-war sentiment. I think that, the federal government uses 30% of our paychecks to continue to fight wars overseas. It's an an issue that we see eye to eye with people from all walks of life on. And we're the only party that's pushing that issue. We're the only one. You know, the anti-war issue has got to be the most important issue for the Libertarian Party. And I think we should be talking about it all the time. We should be putting out media about it. We should have people like Scott Horton advising our candidates on it. It's just very, very important that we make that the forefront of our push. We're the only party that really cares to talk about it, you know. Currently, we have a president who's saying he's going to bring troops home, but he's not. He sent another 4,000 or 400 troops over to Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's not ending. They're not pulling people back from the woods, and we need to be the strongest anti-war voice in politics today. We have to be that. Outside of that, I think, you know, ending the drug war is obviously important to people all over the country. We're locking thousands of people in cages for years and years and years of their life for ingesting plants still. I think that's insane. I think people all over the country see eye to eye with us on that as well. Immigration's a big one. You know, I think that regardless of your stance on national borders as a libertarian, I believe that anybody can look at our current immigration policy, probably say, you know, there's probably some changes that need to be made. You know, we can't have people sleeping in cages. This isn't okay. We need to figure out a better way. So I think, you know, those are some pretty big issues. But the anti-war sentiment is my personally biggest issue, and I think it needs to be the Libertarian Party's biggest issue as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. To me, I guess my top two would be anti-war first, immigration second, war on drugs third. As a party, relative to our standing in the general population in 2016, we polled significantly better amongst military veterans. Are you disappointed as a party that we have let those 4 years slip without actively engaging at some level the veterans, the veterans movement? I mean, particularly amongst your generation, so many of whom served in some form in either the first or second wars, or this, in some cases, lifetime relationship, as I say, we have with Afghanistan. Was that a missed opportunity, and do you see value in pursuing that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, you can look at the Ron Paul campaigns for all the evidence you need. Ron Paul had the most active duty and veteran single donations out of any candidate in that Republican primary for a reason. Because veterans and active duty military members understand the need for rolling back war. Because they're the ones out there fighting it. They're the ones who know that we don't need to be there. They're the ones that want to come home, be with their families, and heal. And we're not tapping into those veterans. We're doing something very, very, very wrong. Very wrong.
They're coming to us. That's the astonishing part. More so, I mean, and this is anecdotal, but more than any other single, I hate to call it an interest group, let's just say single coalition of individuals, they are seeking us more aggressively, perhaps, than any other group of individuals. If they can find us on their own, imagine, if you will, if we actually actively targeted our membership drives directly at veterans. And as you pointed out, you know, Scott Horton came to Rhode Island just a year ago this weekend. A phenomenal individual, articulate, passionate, beyond passionate, but at the same point, well-informed to a degree that I think frankly exceeds just about any federal legislator I've met in my lifetime.
Nobody has more insight to war than Scott Horton. I don't think that 5-star generals know as much about war as Scott Horton does.
Yeah, it's encyclopedic. Imagine if we just simply presented him to veterans groups and said, "Hey, listen, let's just talk. You know, under the Larry Sharpe method, let's just have a conversation. Plant a seed." Again, there's so many low-hanging fruit that, and I understand resources are always an issue. I get that better than anybody. You know, I work with a group of very dedicated individuals in one of the bluest states in the nation. But that being said, there's too many talented people who need to be harnessed in this organization. reflections, if you will, and by the way, if you're just joining me, Josh Smith is the candidate for the national chairmanship of the Libertarian Party at a convention to be held in Austin, Texas this coming year. If for many folks who are entering the convention season, if you want to be a delegate, now is the time to sign up to the National Party. The National Party needs your support, and it also needs dedicated, involved people like Josh Smith. We're running into a time now where we're going to have a national election. It's fairly clear that whoever our candidates are, and probably won't have the name recognition, if you will, that we had with the two governors. What do you believe the role of the national party should be in a national election? What are your thoughts on that direction?
Well, here's my thing, and I've said this several times. Our presidential nominee and vice presidential nominee they're chosen to go on a national media tour for the Libertarian Party. That's what their job is. Most of us are under no illusion that we're going to have a Libertarian president in 2020, right? So we want whoever's going to be able to go out there and educate the population and get as many votes as possible, too, because that's what helps us keep ballot access around the country. We get that 5%, that magic 5% number. That's what gets us into the debates. But as important is educating people on what libertarian is, what libertarian party is, and giving them a role model to move them towards our causes. And so I think that once the libertarian presidential nominee is chosen, the party needs to do some work in the states to help the states build the infrastructure so that when the presidential election is happening and they're touring around the country and they're going to different states and doing their media tour, that the state parties, they have the opportunity to, kind of take some of that trickle down. And people that are coming in and trying to get involved because of the presidential election should be trickling into the state parties and the local parties. And I think, it all comes back to infrastructure. It's all it is. Our affiliates are created to create infrastructure for our candidates that we can win elections, fundraise so that we can get in the media. So I think that's what the national party's job is with the presidential election, is to help, build infrastructure anywhere it can and use that presidential election to do so.
No, and I agree. One of my disappointments from 2016 was the absence of any real interaction in many states' affiliates with the national campaign. There are some that argue that, the national party should not dictate to the campaign. Well, of course they shouldn't. But don't conflate that with creating an environment where there's, mutual cooperation, where, the presence of a national candidate can be used to endorse local candidates and give them some airtime, at the same time presenting them the opportunity to, again, as a national candidate, you're right, educate people about what libertarianism is really about, as opposed to the myths that are created by the duopoly. Because the duopoly is not interested, nor is a lot of the conventional media interested in the competition. They're just not. And I look to states like Ohio, and there are so many like this, where you've got real heroes in the trenches, managing to get ballot access or fighting for ballot access, despite the best efforts of reasonable politicians like John Kasich. Because he's such a reasonable liberty Republican. He believes in liberty as long as it involves in taking away the voting rights, if you will, of libertarians. And I think we have to start using the same type of phrases the civil rights movement uses with regard to stealing votes and preventing people from exercising their right to vote. All right, with the libertarian movement, because they are actively working to marginalize us in the same way that they have marginalized minority communities across the generations. And
absolutely. And I'll tell you, Ohio doesn't even have the worst ballot access laws. There's other states that are worse. Alabama is horrendous.
Rhode Island, the worst, and that's from that's from the ballot access guy. All right. All right.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out to folks in Rhode Island, you need 5% of either a gubernatorial race or the presidential race. Alrighty then. You know, it ain't easy. You know, but we've got a couple minutes left. Let's close on this. I see you as being ceaselessly optimistic about the future of the party. Whenever you discuss it, you got a smile on your face, and you see the green shoots. You see, you know, the opportunities that lie ahead of us. My profound hope, and I love your comment on this, is that the sort of cynicism, if you will, that has permeated a number of party activities, a number of relationships, will go away. How important is it for you as a leader to display a sense of purpose and optimism amongst the party faithful?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked a lot about that over the last 2 years. We have to cultivate a culture that is optimistic and is wanting to win, because it hasn't been the culture for 40 years. You know, the culture has been like, okay, well, we're going to lose this race, so let's get out at what we can. I want our culture to say, we're going to win these races, and this is how we're going to win this race. And I think it's just super important. And I think that starts at the highest echelon of leadership from any affiliate. So I'm going to stay optimistic, and a lot of my optimism comes from the success that I've had. You know, it's from the fact that I've been able to sign up hundreds of members around the country just by being who I am, you know, just by being myself. It's you know, we've been able to raise money, and we've been able to raise money for the party, and we've been able to do things with the affiliate support committee. I'm optimistic because of the successes that I've had, and I know that culture can be bred for the rest of the party around the country.
You know, I've done this to you once before. And if you had a minute or two and you kind of do, give folks just a reason right now. Just, you know, and it's been a great conversation, but kind of look in the eyes of the rest of the party out there and tell folks exactly why Josh Smith should be the next national chair.
Thanks, Pat. I think that I should be the next national chair because I put in the work. Honest to God, my campaign slogan last year was "Let's get to work," and I embodied that the second I walked off that stage in 2018. You know, I became like I said, the chair of the affiliate support committee. I got on every single committee I could. I started working campaigns. I've been successful doing the work that I said I would. And I want to take that and put it on a grander scale as the chair of the Libertarian National Committee. And I believe that with the help of the people that I've surrounded myself and the work that I've already done and the success I found, we can be more successful as a party around the country.
There you go. Folks, Josh Smith, he is running to be the chairman of your Libertarian Party nationally. Currently, he serves on the Affiliate Support Committee, a host of other committees that betray even the extreme levels of the alphabet soup that is your LNC. I'm proud, actually, that I'll be going to my first LNC meeting in person as an alternate to my region in Miami this coming month. I'm looking forward to the spirit, the community, the engagement, and shaking a few people's hands who still won't call me after 6 years. But I'm not obsessed.
We're going to have Cuban sandwiches, Pat, you and I.
All right, buddy. Listen, Josh, again, thanks for coming on tonight. Don't be a stranger. In the spirit of cooperation, of course, the coalition doors are open to anyone who is running for presidency, vice presidency, and the national chairman, as well as a variety of posts on the LNC. It's all about the conversation. It's all about discussion. You know, and quite frankly, this party could use a lot more of that, particularly at the national level. So, Josh, thanks for joining me tonight.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Pat. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure.
All right, buddy. We're going to call it quits for the evening, but we ain't going away. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here in the city of Providence, the city we so love, the naked city, the city of about 360,000 stories. You know, it's a crisp fall evening. Take a moment. Go out tonight and sample, well, all the sin that this city has to offer. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And, of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. Folks, at this moment, always want to take a moment to thank our great sponsors, Yacht Club Soda, Air Sciences, and of course, Beacon Shipping and Logistics. Anywhere around the nation, if you hear this podcast coming in the next few days and you got to ship an automobile somewhere, imagine an automobile shipping company who gets to deal with adults, ships vehicles worldwide, is willing to, well, let's be blunt, keep on the air a libertarian podcast. Those businesses need your support. They deserve your support, because businesses like them and businesses across the nation that help subsidize the fight for liberty, well, we all got to stick together. On that note, we know you have a lot of choices to where to spend a Friday evening or where to listen to podcasts. We thank you for choosing us tonight. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week.